Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Coffee and Open Source, a place to meet some new friends, have some great conversations, and maybe learn something on the way. I'm your host, Isaac Levin. If you're joining the conversations here, be sure to like, subscribe, follow if you're watching or listening. Also, if you or someone you know like to come on the show and have a chat with me, you can find me on social media because I'm where you are. And if you want to figure out what my handle is, you can go to isaacr11.com and you'll see a list of all the different places that I'm in. All right, with that out of the way, we don't get very many opportunities on the show to, one, talk to people we've already talked to, but also talk to people that have been doing this cool AI thing since before it was cool. And I'm looking forward to figuring out what this person's been up to in the last few years since they've been on the show. So my guest is Paige Bailey. Paige, do you want to introduce yourself for the people who haven't heard of
Greetings.
you? Yeah.
Yeah, it's greeting. It's great to get to chat with you again. My name is Paige. I do sort of developer relations at DeepMind, which includes everything from the Gemini APIs to our Gemma open model family, AI Studio, Anti-Gravity, basically any of the AI developer tools that we have coming out of the lab. And before that, I was working on our models at DeepMind, working on developer tools back in the day. And also had the benefit to be able to test out some of the early iterations of Copilot at GitHub and some of our cool tools like Codespaces and machine learning features in VS Code. So really excited to talk today about machine learning and AI and developer tools and everything in between.
Yeah, and I think the last time we talked, we spent a good amount of time talking about like how you got started in this space because you've been doing this space basically since you graduated from college. So I'd like
Yeah.
to kick off the conversations. We haven't talked in 4 years. So
Yeah.
what's happened in the last 4 years?
Oh my gosh, what hasn't happened? Like
Yeah,
it feels like the entire world has picked up on, we were just, I think, starting to chat a little bit about things like Copilot or AI
yeah,
assistants and developer tools like the early days of IntelliCode. And now I think that everybody is kind of moved into this brave new world of, most engineers that I work with haven't written a single line of code by hand in the last year or
yeah,
more.
yeah,
And if anything, like I feel like I'm managing a whole bunch of asynchronous and automated processes running on a cloud VM that are just doing everything from looking at docs and fixing them to creating tutorials to like testing out integrations and alerting me if something's broken. So the entire practice of software engineering has changed over the course of the last 4 years. I think the models have just gotten so good, and the model harnesses have gotten so good that the world looks completely different.
yeah. It's pretty crazy to think that in the last 3 or 4 years, we've basically introduced like a whole new span of like terms to the glossary. Like people
Yeah.
last time we talked, like LLMs was not a thing that people talked about. GPT was not a thing we talked about. Harnesses and all these other like things, right? I'm curious for you as somebody that, like you mentioned, you've been kind of a part of this behind the scenes for so long. Like, what was the moment for you where you thought to yourself, "Oh, this is like prime time now. Like this is something that like a very small subset of folks really care about. Like this is something that everybody could care about."
Yeah, I think the first time I really felt the magic was really using Copilot. Like it just felt, even for the earliest days, it felt so miraculous to go from something like an IntelliCode, which was just, auto completing 2 or 3 lines
Yeah.
at best, to something that was like full code blocks, right? Like dozens and dozens of lines. And the early kind of UX of Copilot, it didn't have any intelligent clipping for the code blocks, so you would just basically get as many tokens as the model could have access to. But and you also got a few different options off to the right with confidence levels, so you could see like, okay, for the thing that you asked, here are like 5 different options, and they're ranked off to the side as to which one might be the best one. But the first time I used that, I was like, well, this is going to completely change everything. Like it's wild to see how well the models are today, and then to just imagine where they'd be 3 months later. Um, the first time though, I think I really um, sort of recognized that the world had shifted was that I grew up in a really small town. It's like 1,300 people in Texas.
Yeah.
And the first time I heard somebody from my hometown talk about ChatGPT, I
Yep.
was just blown away.
Yeah.
Like there's been such a significant uptake in at least AI for chat purposes and chat uses all around the world. And there, I don't think there's any going back. And who would want to go back?
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
It's pretty crazy too. Finish what you're saying, and I have a thought to all that.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I was gonna say. Like the software engineering practice has basically moved from one-on-one interactions with code and trying to remember syntax to like effectively everyone being a manager.
Yeah.
And now I think that information work is about to have a similar uptick.
Yeah. I was thinking about this the other day about how Copilot was around because I think of Copilot like what it is now, and I almost forget what Copilot was when it first came out, like in 2021, right? Like because to your point, like I think Christmas time of 2022 when ChatGPT came out, it was the world's first introduction to like, oh, now there's a giant text box that you can literally put whatever you care about into it and it gives you something. And then that turned into like the new what, chat or what Copilot eventually became is like a wrapper of sorts for language models. Um and like I've said this story a few times, but I was with a bunch of family for Christmas that in 2022 after ChatGPT came out. Nobody in my family had seen it before, so I did like the oh, make me a a casserole recipe or whatever it was, and I remember my wife's uncle who owns like a recruiting business basically said, oh, I could use this to like automate almost all of my job. And like he figured it out very, very quickly, and he went and rebuilt a bunch of custom GPTs, and now he's a heavy adopter of AI for his business. And I was thinking about this from a developer's perspective. I don't really remember, and you probably do, like when developers started to take this stuff seriously. Because I think that
Mm.
we've always been like go to Stack Overflow, copy some code from Stack Overflow and use that, right? But now it was, oh, go to ChatGPT or uh, Gemini or Claude and just say in a web browser, say generate me a method that does this. Like when did you realize from a developer perspective that this stuff was actually consumable for actual developer work?
I really do feel like the earlier iterations of Copilot, and then after we started seeing this explosion of new IDEs like Cursor, Windsurf, and now Anti-Gravity. I think everybody got very inspired by Claude Code and Codex,
Yeah,
and like these things that we're able to do not just the one-on-one interactions, but also a little bit more in the realm of like, okay, well, I'll go search and find what
yeah,
the best SDK to use might be. I'll go and kind of connect to your drive or connect to some assets that I might be able to pull in. These things that felt a little bit more kind of a little bit more sort of I hate using the word agentic, but
sure,
they felt
yeah,
a little bit more proactive and a little bit more kind of independent in terms of behaviors, than just you having to explicitly define step by step everything that the model would need to accomplish in order to solve a task. I think that's when people started getting really inspired, because if you do have kind of these back and forth behaviors with a chat box in your ID, you can go a little bit farther, but you can't go as far as by saying like, hey, here's the outcome that I'm trying to drive. I need you to build a plan, have me okay the plan, and then kind of do whatever is required in order to achieve that outcome.
yeah.
The same as you would with a colleague or with an intern. Um, so I think those kinds of more independent and high agency behaviors were what inspired developers to really start thinking about how more and more of their work could be offloaded to models.
Yeah. You mentioned like the anti-gravity and cursor and sort of like those like agent first like IDs or agent first tools. And it's interesting. I've seen like this switch, obviously for some developer types and developer personas, it's always been like we use an IDE for this, we use an IDE for this. And there's a small subset that's, oh, we use the terminal for this, we use the CLI for this.
Yeah.
Then Claude Code comes out and then it's like, oh, like why would I care about an IDE? Just do everything in Claude Code. And now we're kind of seeing the pendulum swift back where it's, we're trying to figure out like, okay, how do you marry like the IDE terminal based experience, but you also like can have like some GUI. And,
Yeah.
I say this in probably the most spicy way. It's like, I don't really want just like a giant like chat window, and that's like my IDE. And I'm curious to know from a developer experience perspective, you know, what is at least for you, you don't need to speak for like the future of tech because we don't have crystal balls, but like for you specifically, like when you're like managing like generation of code, not writing code, because I think that's whatever, we talked about that. Like, what is the ideal, like things that you need to look at, things that you see from there? Because I think that we're also trying to figure out like what the optimal like viewing experience is for managing agents and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I definitely feel like we haven't cracked the nut in terms of logs, like understanding what agents are doing,
Yeah.
where they are in terms of how far have they been able to go to kind of complete the work, whether they might be kind of stuck or stalled on a specific step of a task, like that visualization layer for agent behavior. I don't think we have yet. Though I'm really excited for different companies to kind of experiment and to see what might be sustainable or desired long term. Um, One thing that I really appreciate about anti-gravity as an IDE is that it will build a plan which you can comment on, like
Yeah.
Google Docs style, or change before doing a significant amount of work. And then you can monitor the agent's behavior, at least in the chat, to see kind of the thinking process, the different files that have been interacted with, kind of the steps, how long each step is taking. And then it will also screenshot and take videos of its work along the way if it's doing any interactions that invoke the browser.
Hmm.
So like launching the browser, doing computer use, kind of seeing how the app that's been created actually behaves, and whether or not that might influence the fixes or kind of design of more of the code. So those pieces I feel like are really in need of significant amounts of product work. Is how do you inform a person just like you would inform a customer if you were a consultant, all of the work that you've done and all of the things that they might want to take a second look at, as well as having kind of like this Kanban board
Yeah.
of all of the steps of the process and where they are in terms of completion.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Conborn specifically because I had somebody on my show a couple weeks ago named Joe Finney who's like building basically like a product manager sort of viewing from like agentic from an agentic like developer perspective. And you mentioned like Kanban boards, and like I think it would be very interesting to see like in real time as agents are doing work, they put things in a Kanban board, they set it
They
like I think that I mean, first off, I don't know how much developers would absorb that because developers sort of hate Kanban boards by nature. But I think like at least for me, I need to actually see the work. Like I was having this conversation with somebody and we were talking about this a little bit before we got started. Like, you know, there's there is no need for these things to like talk to each other via English language, right?
yeah,
Like they can talk using whatever format they want because it doesn't matter. The only reason why it's
yeah,
in English is for humans, right?
yeah,
And like if you try to drill down, like you create a prompt, you hit enter, and then it fans out, it creates like 4 or 5 agents, and every agent has like its own specific like goal. And if you want to like just see something like I want to see like how these agents interacting with each other, it's like not a very simple ask because, when you talk to a human being, there is delay, right? You ask human
mhm,
beings something, they have to go do it, they ask questions, right? It's a longer tail, right? And for these agents that are talking to each other like it's nanoseconds or microseconds, right? So from your
Yep.
perspective, like what is the optimal amount of things the developer cares about? Because I think some people like believe like the developer cares about nothing now other than the inputs and the outputs. Like I'm curious for you as somebody who's probably like naturally curious about what's actually going on under the hood, like what level of detail is important to you?
Yeah, I do feel like I agree with you that the agents, there's no reason why they should be corresponding with each other in English other than communicating to us. Like the most optimal way would be either like system level code by code, like whatever would be, or they might kind of design a much more kind of a much more efficient mechanism of communication than anything that humans might have devised. But I do feel like Kanban boards have historically been very, very tech specific. So like upgrade from one dot release of a framework to another, implement this function with these specs, etc. I don't necessarily think we need that level of detail for these agent visualizations, but it would be very, very useful for people to be able to monitor, like, all right, well, I asked you to analyze these 200 images, which would require you to upload them to cloud storage. What percentage completeness are we for uploading these images to
Yeah.
cloud storage? What is the expected cost of some of these interactions? Like when you designed this system, like uploading to cloud storage, did you also like make the choice to save like a thumbnail implementation so that it would load faster on the website? Those sorts of things. And right now, like I think we're in this weird interstitial period where humans still need to kind of ask those harder
Yeah.
questions of like, did you think about these considerations and trade-offs? Like, are you thinking about the dollars associated? Whereas hopefully longer term models will be able to have all of that just kind of baked in
Yeah.
as best practices regardless. But I do want to be able to ask an agent kind of similar to how you would ask a team or a consultant, what percentage complete are we, and then what is the estimated timeline for completion, and how much is it going to cost me, or the
Yeah.
cost's going to run astray.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's wild to think about it like that because the marketing is always like it's like a team of engineers, right? But we don't
Mm.
treat them like team of engineers. We treat them like things that do units of work, which
Yep.
is an oversimplification of the process. Like you mentioned something like I think the telemetry like we talk a lot about like okay wiring up like open telemetry to be able to see the traces between agent calls and things like that, but that is like in my opinion like that is so far level down. Like we need like an abstraction layer on top of that where it gives me like again to just to be a boring human like human level like responses to the things that are happening that are coming from open telemetry. So it's almost like
Yep.
you need an agent whose whole job it is to like speak to the dumb human, right?
Yep.
Which I think is fascinating because, you know, at some point there's probably some science fiction where it's like the humans are just brought into the process because we have to bring them into the process, right? Um
And I
yeah.
think we're already, very, very close to being there, if not there already, right? Like I mentioned that myself and a whole bunch of my coworkers haven't written code by hand in the
Yeah.
last year. Like we are pretty much just managing agents and like making sure that nothing goes off the rail, that the outcomes that the team needs are actually being achieved. Like, and I think that it's only going to get more significant longer term, that this is the way that we work now.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because
Yep.
I think to the point where I was talking a little bit this about how we got started is, we've always cared about the inputs and outputs, and that was like the thing that mattered the most in building software, shipping products. And, there would just be like this giant gap in the middle. because it would take
Yeah.
how long an engineer to build things. And now that engineers don't take any time to build things in a vacuum, like we need to iterate faster with providing inputs and realizing outputs. Um, so like for
Yeah.
you, when you are, and this is to backtrack a little bit too. Like I had a question, then I had a different question, so apologize. But
It's okay.
like so, I mean, the imagination unlock for this stuff is crazy. Like, so
Yeah.
when did you realize, like, oh, like every silly idea that Paige has in her head can now become a real thing?
I think I realized this for the first time whenever we implemented a feature in AI Studio, um, it called, I guess this was 6 months ago, 8 months ago, but deploy to Cloud Run, where you could like effectively vibe code an app, and then there's a one button click that automatically sets up a Cloud Run
Yeah,
deploy for you. So it'll have storage, it'll like be able to scale out if you have multiple requests, so you don't have to worry about Kubernetes and setting up Kubernetes yourself. Like it has a unique URL that you can then kind of use a registered domain that you've got, just sort of make sure that the Cloud Run deployment, your registered domain name is pointing to the Cloud Run deployment. And as soon as all of that happened, and knowing that I could just kind of ask for that with one button click, um, it completely unlocked everything, because
yeah,
suddenly like you could have a website that's deployed to a unique URL that anybody could access, that's scalable worldwide, and it's just mind-boggling to see. And even after that, we added Firebase support, so the
yeah.
ability to have kind of a database attached, secure authentication, so you could have, people log into your website and save their progress, that all of that could be done securely, and all through vibe coding. Like how many, we've both been doing this for a while. Like how many businesses are just kind of apps with databases and
Oh,
authentication, like, and
it's crazy.
payments.
It's
Like,
crazy. Yeah, it's crazy.
yep, yep,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
And
wild. Finish what you're saying. Go ahead.
yeah. Yeah, no, no, no. I was just going to say like so many businesses that had historically been like blood, sweat, and tears of people trying to get these services online and making sure that they could scale. Now you could do effectively over the course of a weekend, and just through natural language requests. Um, and and if that's the case, then like this entire practice of software engineering is about to get real weird,
Yeah.
because easily you could just have like an agent whose only job is like ideation of companies that should exist, like creation of all of the companies that should exist, and then monitoring to see feature requests for any of the things, and monitoring logs to see like what are some of the frictions that users encounter, and how to improve the websites over time. So you could effectively have websites that are just automatically created and running themselves like passive businesses, like vending machines on your behalf.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I have so many thoughts there. It's like, hey Gemini, create me a SaaS that does this, and then turn that SaaS into a business so I can use it as a customer, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it. I think too, it is very interesting because at the end of the day, like all of this stuff is very opinionated, even though if it's like the intention isn't for it to be opinionated. Like your example earlier, where it's like, okay, it's going to create me storage, it's going to create me authentication, it's going to create me all the things. And in the past, like it was the job of like an architect to like figure out like what the services are that we should be using. This is the scale up and scale out sort of methodology, like all these sort of things, right? And the thing that I worry about, it's like, do we care? Like, do we
Yeah.
really care? Because if you have agents that are monitoring like production reliability, if you have agents that are managing the code base, if you have agents that are managing this, it's like, you know, I don't think we are that far away from a business being somewhat fully autonomous. Like
Oh yeah.
if you really wanted to get to there. And you're seeing like people do experiments of like they're like automating their C-suite, or like a CEO is like, okay, well now I have a bunch of agents that are my CMO, my CIO, whatever, right? Um, and I think this gets to like the quote unquote scary part of the conversation. It's like, why are we here? So like, I'd love to kind of like, as somebody who very much cares about like developers being successful in their jobs, and with the anxiety for some people, it's like, okay, well, developers will probably never have the jobs that they wanted ever again. Um, what are some things that you're seeing in this space that has proven to you like, oh, developers and engineers and PMs and like the entire like software development lifecycle, like org chart is still required for this sort of work?
I think what we're seeing now is that so it's not so much like I'm personally of the opinion that massive teams are probably massive teams are probably going to change, right? Like because suddenly you can do so much more with just a relatively small number of humans. Um and like and I think that's actually pretty magical. Like when I think back on career, like some of the most fun work that I've ever been able to do are on small teams.
Yeah.
Like with a relatively, close knit bunch of folks who are all like similarly like aligned and excited about the work. And they want to be able to accomplish some task or to really really understand and nail a specific problem. And so I think that now we're in this place where these tiny, tiny teams, whether it's at a startup or whether it's at a larger company, can do outsized amounts of work. And that's really exciting. That if you're an engineer who enjoys wearing a product hat, or you're a designer who really wants to actually get some handle on front end or back end code, then this is a world that is great for you,
Yeah.
because for all of these creative humans that had previously really hated being pushed into boxes, like we don't have to be in a box anymore.
Yeah.
Like we can do all of these interesting things. And at DeepMind, a lot of us have started kind of consolidating around a single role title called member of the technical
Yeah.
staff, which is actually encompassing, product engineering, design, even things like marketing into, a singular role that's able to do all of the above.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think that the challenge is that first off, I agree. It's like, if you're a generalist in tech, a lot of people that have been generalists have made like great careers out of being like, oh, I do a little bit of product work, I could do some ops work, I can write code, I can do these things, right? Um,
Yep.
but the problem is that the constraints of the current like corporate org structure doesn't accommodate that very well. It's like, oh, like if you're a PM, you get paid this much. If you're an engineer, you get paid this much, right? If you're in marketing, you get paid way less, right? So it's one of those things where how do we figure out like the most effective way to compensate people since they're all doing like very, very similar jobs now, right? But they're
Yep.
doing it from like a very specific lens. And I'm curious for you. It's like, what are some of the like, what are the domains that you've been surprised that Paige has had to be more involved with over the course of the last few years?
Definitely marketing is really, really mission critical now. I think that um, you know, much of the much of the zeitgeist around model usage, around products people want to try, is on how well you can kind of communicate the message of what those products are trying to ship or to do for you. And that conversation has largely shifted to places like Twitter or TikTok or whatever it is. Like when I started doing Twitter, it was a long, long time ago, and I was effectively just treating it like a journal, like
Sure.
just
Yeah.
sharing whatever I learned online. And now, like for better or worse, a bunch of the conversation is happening in these kinds of places that, if you would have asked someone 5 years ago, like they would not have expected the AI discourse to have been overtaken on Twitter.
Yeah.
Like and so like I think there's yeah, like as it becomes kind of more and more obvious that the world is saturated with all of these software products,
Sure.
that we have much more software generated. Like we're going to need an intelligent layer to help people figure out what they should pay attention to figure out, to help agents figure out what they should be paying attention to,
Yeah.
and almost like SEO for like all of the different tools that have been created. I also feel like for a bunch of the software that's generated, many of the kind of sub functions or kind of sort of aspects that are the aspects that are generated as code could be repurposed into libraries that could be reusable across many different kinds of software. Um, but that's not happening at the moment
Yeah.
because there's no incentive for people to create libraries or SDKs. And so the same kinds of code gets re-implemented over and over again, as opposed to being put into a reusable and consumable package that could be repurposed. Um, so I feel like that needs to get solved as well. Is like you could imagine like there's a particular kind of widget, and all of the large language models, whether it's GPT 5.5 or Opus 4.6 or one of the Gemini models, has re-implemented this thing 1,000 times, and
Yeah.
it should probably be part of a library. We just need something to kind of connect those dots and figure out what the libraries of the future should look like, instead of just using model cycle time to keep regenerating those tokens over and over again.
Yeah, I mean that's first off, I love this conversation because I see it even if I'm doing something with one model, right? Like I'll ask something to get built and it'll create like a helper function to do something. And then I go somewhere
Yeah,
else in the project and it'll create the same helper function with this a little bit
100%.
different. And I I think to myself, are you not looking across the entire code base here? Like, I
Yeah.
understand context being a thing, and it really can't index an entire code base and throw that up to a model call because it'll be crazy. But
Yeah.
at the same time, the amount of times that I've seen like a is null, like which is basically just like a wrapper for like a
Yep.
conditional check. It's like, why are you creating like 10 of these? And
Yep.
you know, I lean on the fact that as a developer and somebody who actually writes code, I can see that and say that's wrong and resolve it, right? But I think to even to
Yep.
like extrapolate that out, it's like if you're using like multiple models, like every model does things a little bit differently, right? And not only that, but they respond to prompts differently. Like,
Yep.
I think it's well documented, like GPT does things a particular way versus Claude versus Gemini, right? And what I've been fascinated about is like you basically have to learn like the new tool that you learn. Like it used to be like, oh, you need to how you use Vim or how you use Emacs or how you use whatever. Now it's like, okay, well now you have to like be an expert in how to use this model and this model and this model.
And it
Um,
changes weekly because the
yes,
models change weekly.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, and this isn't even for the software side too. This is for everything. Like I
Yep.
use I use Canvas a lot because I hate building slide decks, right?
Hmm.
And now I can just like, okay, I need a slide that looks like this and whatever, and make it look pretty and blah blah blah, and it generates it for me. Um, and Claude has something similar. I can't remember what it's called, but like if I take that same prompt and go over to Claude, like it just generates something completely different. And as a end user, my expectation is because these things more or less are commodities to me. Like I should be able to provide prompt and get output. um the fact that they're substantially different kind of like bums me out to an extent. Not that like I
Yeah.
want like not that I want like the exact same thing, but I want like different variations of the same thing, if that makes sense.
It definitely does. And I think this kind of strange world that we live in, where we have to like minutely change prompts going from one model service provider's family of models to another, is a lot of cognitive overhead. Like it's effectively the same, like remembering how to craft prompts, remembering to add in services or like add in skills for specific services, like all of this kind of cognitive overhead that the user has to take into account right now. I don't think will persist long term.
Sure.
Just like, in the before times, we had to worry about syntax between TypeScript versus Python versus Java, whatever it
Yeah.
is. And now everybody's just kind of like, well, if the software works and it runs, then that's all that matters. I don't care what language it's implemented in, as long as it's performant and efficient and it does the job.
Yeah.
Um, and like, I believe me, like, I spent so many of my brain cells caring about pandas syntax for Python, and now like pandas and matplotlib, and now none of those brain cells, like, it's, it was all for naught, because like, I am blessed in the sense that hopefully I will never have to worry about it again.
Yeah, it is kind of
um
funny the
yeah.
the toil that gets taken away, but also more toil gets added somewhere else.
Yeah, at least for now. I think longer term too, we'll also have a scenario where instead of the user having to explicitly ask for things, the models will just like do it for us,
Mm,
without us needing to ask. And this like model as concierge thing is really exciting to think through as well. Like it's, something that would be able to just kind of recognize on its own, like, hey, Paige, you really, really love Black Moth Super Rainbow. Did you know that they're going to be in San Francisco next month? Would you like for me to purchase a ticket for you and like put it on your calendar as a reminder? Like that would be such a beautiful life,
yeah.
right?
Well,
Like,
that's the dream. That's like the absolute dream, right? Like
yeah,
the Jetsons or the Tony Stark, where it's like this thing doesn't like wait for me to like order it to do something. It's hanging out
yeah,
with me and it's monitoring all the things that I need to care about or that I want to care about, and it just keeps me in the loop. So
absolutely.
um and we were talking about this before we got started. It's like we're talking about like the differentiation between, oh, you need to do this way versus this model family, and this way this or this model family, and we're just talking about like the main models, like the big three companies that are shipping models today. But there's all these other models that exist, like some are open weight, some are some are provided by smaller providers. And I'm genuinely curious, it's like, for you, how often do you experiment with, like, I guess, non-mainstream models? Like,
Oh,
are
all the
yeah,
time. All the time. Like, I think especially in the open model space, in the open model space, there's just a proliferation of models that are available to kind of test out, every single week, if not every single day. And the only way to really, kind of understand the behaviors of these things is by testing them out actively.
yeah,
Yeah. But I will say that the majority of the time, like, it's going to be testing out against the usual suspects, which would be like Gemini's performance compared to OpenAI or Anthropic, or some of the open model service providers.
yeah. We were talking about this too, like, you know, as the pricing changes for these models, and I think that for some people or some companies, it will be more advantageous to start looking at like open weight models that you can run
Mm.
locally on your machine to do, maybe some trivial tasks, like maybe you do your planning with a local model like a Gemma or what have you. And then when you need to generate, 15,000 lines of code, you use the big one. Like, what is your opinion as to like, that future state where we all have specialized hardware devices, like we have the new Windows laptops or the new Mac laptops, and they have like the optimal hardware to run models locally without it, turning your laptop into an airplane. Um, like, what do you think like the happy path is there between transferring work from doing work locally with models versus using the big guns?
I really feel like, at least for right now, the most optimal path, like an energy efficiency, token efficiency, dollar efficiency perspective, is having a model be kind of the planner or the reasoner. And so, like, right now with an anti-gravity, it's able to break down all of my, like, if I have a high level task, it breaks it out into 20, 25 steps or however many steps. I would love to be able to say, if 20 of those 25 steps is a relatively trivial task or something that could be accomplished with a local model, please use that, and then only like phone home to the REST API, to the REST API call if you need to. And that way, instead of paying for 25 calls to what might be an expensive model, being able to do something like, you know, if I give a little bit of feedback to the effect of, hey, this button is great, but I would really love for it to be pink, or like a
Sure.
pink gradient. That's a simple enough task that I should be able to invoke a local model instead of needing to go and ping like a Sonnet or an Opus or a Gemini.
Yeah, you mentioned like change this button pink. Like I uh I built some, like I added search to the podcast website where it's like, oh, I want to search for guests or whatever.
Yeah.
And like what generated was like a center aligned like div for like the search results. And I was like, I don't like the way this looks. So I went to the CSS and I changed it to like left justified, and I felt like a real developer again. It was so great. Um but no, I mean, it is funny because you talk to some people and like they've made the commitment, like I think you and some other folks have done, where it's like, I'm not writing any code at all. And
Yeah.
if you see some results that are, I guess, like 1% different than what you want, like I think the immediate reaction for some folks is to literally just go and make the change and hit enter, right? And I think to the effect that it's like every time you hit enter, it's a non-trivial amount of things that happen during that process, right? Like you said, it makes a call out to the model, you're using tokens, you're using whatever. The idea that you're talking about, where it's like, hey, if this is something really trivial, like just use Quen or use Gemma or whatever, right? I think
Yeah.
that, I think the bottleneck there is hardware. Like, I have, this desktop, like it's got 100 gigs of RAM, it's got a really really nice processor, and if I try to run like some pretty large like open models, like I'm having a hard time on this machine, like
Yeah.
because like it's got to put everything into memory and all that sort of stuff. Like, do you think that there is, like, will there be opportunities in the future to, like, say you have like a 40 billion parameter model, do you think that's always going to be, that's always going to take the same amount of resources, or do you think it's going to take less?
No,
Yeah.
not at all. Like I think it's also really, I love artificial analysis.ai for just understanding model performance over time, and how these things shift. But like as an example, our Gemma 4 billion parameter model is exceeding the capabilities of GPT OSS 120B,
That's
despite
crazy.
being like,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's crazy.
despite being like something that you can handily run on your laptop or even like embed in WebAssembly in the browser. Um, and it's like it came, just a few months really after GPT OSS 120B, maybe 6 months.
Yeah.
So I think that whatever the frontier capabilities are today, like it would not be unreasonable to assume that 6 months from now, you'll have a tiny model that will work on the browser to do the same thing.
Well, you're seeing this with DeepSeek a lot. Like DeepSeek will roll out their new model, and it's like you don't understand how it does the same thing as like a model that's like in the cloud that supposedly has like 700 billion parameters, right? Like
Yeah.
it's it's pretty crazy. And I think one of the things that fascinates me, we talked about this a little before we got started, is like what the life cycle looks like. Like when you get the opportunity to like play around with a new model, like what are some of the things that you're looking for? What are some of the things you care about? And then how do you provide that feedback loop to get the model to a point where it's ready to be announced publicly?
Yeah. I think that we have an early access program for our Gemini models, both one that we run out of DeepMind as well as one that's run through our Vertex AI enterprise customers. And these folks get access to models before they're released. They're able to give feedback. They're able to provide evals so we can test how our new model families, perform for those kinds of use cases. And I really feel like that's the only way that we can improve model performance over time, is by knowing what they're good at, knowing what they're bad at, and then taking the stuff that they're bad at and getting examples added to pre-training and post-training data so that they can get better over time. And now it's not even just the model that we need to make sure is capable, that can reason about all of these scenarios. It's more importantly like the agent harness surrounding the model, to know what tools to invoke in order to help accomplish the task, to know if it should be calling out to additional models, all of these kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, and somebody in chat mentioned what does open source come into play with all this? Like we talked about open weight, but that's not like truly open source, right? Like,
Yeah.
how does open source come to play? Because I think that there's a lot of opinion where it's like if you want something built, like why would you go out to GitHub and fork a repo or clone a repo, test it locally, do all of that work to see if it works for you or not, when you could just vibe code like the opinionated thing that you exactly want, right? Um like I'm generally curious from your perspective, like what does the role open source play in this new world where, I mean, quite frankly, like we talked about this a bit earlier, like do we care about code at all anymore?
Yeah. I think that open open source is really important. Open source and open data is really important from a model's perspective, because if you don't know what data the model was trained on, then you're not going to have much insight into its capabilities. Like you can have all of the compute that you can think of, but if the pre-training data doesn't really encompass all of the use cases that you're trying to get the model to do, then you're going to be a little bit out of luck. And I think that historically, the AI world has done a little bit of a better job, not a perfect job by any stretch of the imagination, but a little bit of a better job of open sourcing maybe the training code for
Yeah,
models, but not really the underlying data. And I think over time that's also something that people will start getting a little bit more curious about, is kind of just like, if you're buying food, you want to know, what are the ingredients, what
sure.
are the nutrition facts, like where did you source some of these things. It'll be the same for companies that are thinking about the security of their models. Like I know that this is kind of been hammered over and over again, but like if you're testing out some of the open models from the Chinese labs and you ask them questions about certain events in history,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
the answers that you get, leave a little bit to be desired.
sure. Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah,
and and there's other kinds of data could just have easily have been left out of the pre-training process, like data about specific kinds of security vulnerabilities, in which case, like if you ask that same model, um, hey, here's some code, does it have a security vulnerability, then it wouldn't be able to spot that either. And so if you exclude certain kinds of data from the pre-training or post-training process, then it's kind of like introducing blinders to those things into the
sure.
models.
Yeah.
And if you're using them in your company, then suddenly you're up a creek, and you don't know that those things are going to potentially blindside you.
Yeah, I mean, you make a very interesting point because being somebody who is somewhat naive, I always assumed the training data was the same
Oh
because
gosh, no.
because I always
Like,
assume like if you have these giant models, they're just scraping all of human history, right? And they're
no,
simulating data too, like they're doing all these things. So I thought the only like proprietary difference was the code that does the actual thing. But like the
no,
weighting and stuff
it's
is probably proprietary as well. But like the train data, I always assumed was basically the same.
No, the training data is dramatically different. Like you can suck up everything that's all over the internet, but then to your point, there's been a lot of synthetic data creation. There's been a lot of kind of work with Scale and Surge and other similar companies to create human data sets that get incorporated into pre-training and post-training. There's a lot of kind of additional kind of creation of code, running of code, verifying of code, traces, logs that get incorporated into pre-training. And each company has a completely different mixture.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, and this is why I mentioned it as kind of being a commodity, right? Where I always just assumed that eventually the special sauce will all be the same. and there'll be like the generic special sauce, which is like your open weight models, and there'll be like the name brand special sauce, which is your Heinz ketchup or whatever, right? Is that is a future like that somewhat naive to think about, or are you kind of the same belief where it's like, whether you get your model from company A, B, or C, in the long run, it doesn't really matter because then it'll be priced the same. Similar to how you think about hyperscalers today. I'm genuinely curious your thoughts, and obviously be as opinionated as you want because you work for one of them. But like, I'm genuinely curious as your thought.
I think that there are some companies who have like Google is very, very good at making things run very fast and
Yeah,
very cheaply, as evidenced by, we have a whole bunch of services that scale out to billions of users all over the world. And if we did that in a way that was not performant and efficient, we wouldn't be able to we wouldn't be able to have enough servers to support all of that work, and we also wouldn't be able to provide services that are good enough that people would care. Um, and so I think that Google's done a really, really good job of making like tiny models that are very performant, efficient, fast, like able to run at a significant price discount. Um, but I think other model service providers are starting to lean into similar techniques. So Anthropic is investing pretty significantly in their TPU footprint. Not sure about OpenAI, but I do envision that certain labs are leaning more into strengths than others. Like Anthropic is really, really leaning into code generation, understandably.
sure.
I think OpenAI is trying to lean into that same area as well. And then DeepMind, our latest Omni release, kind of our first um, uh, sort of like saying this aloud moment, but Gemini models are able to understand a whole bunch of different things. So audio, video, images, text, code, all of it natively, but it can also output multiple modalities. So
Yeah.
it can output text, it can output code, but it can also output audio. It can output audio in multiple languages, like music,
Hmm.
images and text interleaved, and now also video. And so I think that we're really, really leaning into multimodal content. Anthropic's really, really leaning into code. And maybe someday we'll all converge, but like in this weird interstitial moment, all of the models seem to be better or worse for specific topics.
Yeah. I mean, like, the first time I realized that I could take a bunch of sources in Notebook LM and like literally generate like a podcast about all those sources was my brain, I didn't wasn't able to comprehend it. And you listen to it and it's actually not bad. Like I expected it to
Yeah.
be like two robots talking to each other, but it's actually surprisingly sounded like real humans talking. I mean,
Yeah.
it, and I do think too, and this is just coming from somebody who uses kind of all these different things. Like I feel like Gemini, in my opinion, is so good at all of the stuff that like what's the best way to phrase this? Like knowledge workers do because of the deep
Yeah.
integration with Google Docs and Drive and all of that. So like if you want, like I mentioned, I use Canvas a lot. If you use slides generated, if you need copy created, if you need these sort of things, it would be like it's substantially good at that. And
Yeah.
I guess for you as somebody who works on the engineering side, and like figuring out ways to like get these models to be optimal for code generation, like what are some things that you're kind of looking at across the landscape? Like, I think that it's safe to say that some of these models like generate more code than others. We talked about like replicating code. Like, what are some things that you're thinking of as like, oh yeah, if we did something like this, but like a little bit different, we could be really successful.
I think the there's a lot of opportunity within the Google products to really, really nail invoking other services. And what I mean by that is we just recently added workspace integrations into AI
Yeah.
Studio.
Yeah.
So in addition to as well as managed agents. So in addition to being able to do those things that I mentioned before around Firebase, around deployments to Cloud Run, you can now also integrate workspace services into your AI Studio apps. And you can also use something called managed agents, which are running on Google Cloud. But they basically spin up an environment that's sandboxed. They give you an agent running 24/7 that can do any of the work that you need to do. And so the service that you mentioned for NotebookLM, the one that generates a podcast, is actually now something that you can just do with the commodity APIs just by asking in natural language.
Yeah.
So like, you're able to replicate the same feature in your own app, um, just in like a span of a minute.
Yeah. And
And it's, yeah, it's just, it's wild to see how fast all of this is changing.
yeah, I
Like,
mean, and I think as we wrap up, I'd love to kind of get your thoughts as like, what does the next 6 months look like in your opinion? Right? Like, because I think we talked a lot about like some magical like sci-fi future, which I think to a lot of people they're not super interested in, but I'm very interested in it because I think I just see it as like, oh, I can focus on doing things I care about more, right? Um,
um,
but I'm generally curious. It's like, when do you feel like we're eventually going to start reaching uncanny valley? Like, because we're going to keep pushing there, right? And eventually there's going to be, in my opinion, there's going to be a big like, nah, that's too far. Let's reel it back and let's maybe think about different interfaces for this or whatever. I'm genuinely curious.
it's a great question. I feel like anytime I try to forecast 6 months into the future, I get pleasantly surprised and then disappointed in other ways. But I do feel like the open models are going to catch up to all of the frontier models that we have currently. Um, I would not be surprised to see more services, especially like Cursor or whatever it might be, or anti-gravity, adopt this approach where you can use local models for a large number of tasks and then only call out to larger models if needed. Even things that might be embedded within the browser in terms of applications. We've just recently embedded a small version of Gemma into the browser for Chrome, as Gemini Nano, those APIs. So like just being able to do work in that way, will be really fascinating. Personally, like I'm really, really into robotics. I used to do wearable hardware, just as kind of a side project when I lived in Houston a long time ago, almost a decade. So I would really, really love to start playing more with these models in terms of the robotic space, in terms of the physical world. And then longer term, I don't know. Like, I mean, everybody's got dreams. Like, I really love building educational games. So, like, if there's a world where I can retire and run like a vegan food truck or like a coffee shop laundromat, and make educational games to help teach kids math and physics concepts, I would be a really happy camper.
Yeah, I mean, I think what this stuff unlocks for you is if you have an idea and you care about it, you can literally figure it out, right? Where I
Yeah,
think in the
on your
past,
own.
yeah, in the past, like I don't really know how to do this. How to like you can get all the way you can get very, very far with just like taking what's in your brain, dumping it into text, right?
Yeah,
Um,
agreed.
yeah, I think there's so much more I'd like to talk with you about, but we're at the end of time. This has been an awesome conversation, Paige. It's really good to catch up with you and see, it doesn't seem like it's been that long, 4 years, but my God, like
Yeah.
4 years is a long time. And I'd like to have you on the show again in less than 4 years because I need to deliver. I need to see if all of your like opinions on things have changed as you've maybe gotten a bit more crusty old, like raising fists
Yep.
at cloud,
Yep.
right? Um,
Yep.
but again, I appreciate your time. And for folks that you might not be following Paige already, I highly recommend you do so. Taking a look at the stuff that's got going on at DeepMind. Good place is Twitter still. So dynamic web page, DYNAMICWEBPAIGE. There'll be a link also to some other places as well as her website, which it, I'll say this. The website and you show like all the fun things that you built with AI is
Mhm.
so fun. Like I
Awesome.
mean I think that, you know, the more we can just take like, oh, I have a silly idea for a silly thing, like let me just build it. Like that's creativity in a nutshell. So definitely take a look at those, folks, if you want to see some cool ideas that Paige had rumbling in her head that decided to kind of get out. And I wanted to thank you again, Paige, for this. Before we sign off, do you have any parting words or last things to say?
Nothing other than I 100% agree with you. And there's never been a better time to build, a better time to create anything, whether it's an Android app, whether it's a web application, whether it's a game. Like now is the time where you can be like a one-person software engineering studio, and it's really really for folks who do have that creative urge in them. Like there has never ever been a better time to be a developer.
I could not agree more. At least the fact that like, oh, I don't know how to build this kind of app, but now I don't really need to care about building that kind of app. Like I
Yeah.
built Chrome extensions, I built Stream Deck plugins, and I've done all this stuff. And I'm like, I didn't know how to start building these things, but I figured it out after I had
Yeah.
an AI, LLM generate the rest of it for me. So with
Awesome.
that, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. I want to thank the people that are tuning in live and engaging with us. I want to thank the people that are listening to this in the future. My name is Isaac Levin. This has been Coffee and Open Source. And if you like this episode, share it with your friends. I bet you they'd like to hear
Awesome.
what Paige had to say about AI because let's be
Mm,
real, Paige knows a lot about AI. And I want to thank you
mhm.
so much again. And I hope everybody you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Awesome.